In 2008, the world discovered something unbelievable. Thousands of people, millionaires, charities, banks, even celebrities, all lost everything. Not because of a market crash, not because of war, not because of a recession, but because of one man, one quiet, calm, trusted man, who secretly ran the biggest financial scam the world has ever seen. A scam so massive, it stole over $65 billion for decades. Nobody suspected a thing. Wall Street trusted him. Regulators trusted him. Investors worshipped him. He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was right in front of everyone, respected, powerful, untouchable. His name, Bernie Madoff. And this is the story of how the biggest scam in financial history fooled the entire world. To understand how this happened, we need to go back. New York City, 1960s. A young man from Queens, middle-class family, not rich, not famous, but ambitious. Bernard Lawrence Madoff. People described him as calm, polite, intelligent, the kind of guy you instantly trust, the kind of guy who looks safe, and that was his greatest weapon. At just 22 years old, he started a small investment company with only $5,000, money he earned installing sprinklers and lifeguarding. Nothing special, no big connections, just a simple dream. Make money on Wall Street. But Bernie wasn't just lucky. He was smart, very smart. He understood something most investors didn't: technology. While others still use paper and phones, Bernie began using computers, electronic trading, automation, speed, and suddenly, his tiny company grew fast, very fast. By the 1980s, Madoff Securities wasn't small anymore. It was huge. He became a pioneer, a respected innovator, even helped build NASDAQ. Yes, the NASDAQ. He later became its chairman, not once, 3 times. Think about that. The man who would later run the biggest scam in history was leading one of the most important stock exchanges in the world. If there was ever a person you should trust, it was Bernie Madoff, or at least, that's what everyone believed. Here's where things get interesting. Madoff had 2 businesses. One was visible, legal, regulated, normal, but the other was secret, quiet, private, exclusive. This second business wasn't for regular people. It was special, invite only. You couldn't just walk in and invest. No, you had to be chosen. This made it feel luxurious, elite, almost magical, and people wanted in, badly. Because Bernie promised something nobody else could. Consistent profits, every month, every year. No big losses, no crashes, just steady gains. Market goes up, you win. Market goes down, you still win. It didn't make sense, but nobody complained because the numbers looked amazing. 10%, 12%, 15% returns, year after year, no risk, too perfect. But perfection can be dangerous because perfection is usually fake. So what was he really doing? There were no investments, no trades, no secret strategy, nothing. It was all a lie. Instead, he was running a Ponzi scheme, one of the oldest tricks in finance, simple, deadly, illegal. Here's how it works. New investors give money. That money is used to pay old investors. Old investors think, wow, I'm making profits. So they invest more and tell their friends. More money comes in. More fake profits are paid. The illusion grows. Everything looks successful. But there's one problem. It only works if new money keeps coming forever. The moment people want their money back, everything collapses. And that's exactly what happened. But before the collapse, the scam grew, bigger than anyone could imagine. This is the scary part. How did he trick banks, lawyers, regulators, experts? Simple. He didn't act like a criminal. He acted boring. No flashy cars, no crazy lifestyle, no attention. Just a quiet office, simple suits, calm voice, grandfather energy. People trust boring people, and Bernie knew that. He also created fake statements Fake trades, fake numbers, all printed on paper. No online verification back then. Everything looked official, professional, perfect. And if someone questioned him, he simply said, "If you don't trust me, take your money elsewhere." That reverse psychology made him look even more honest. People thought, wow, he doesn't even need my money, he must be legit. Genius manipulation for decades. Nobody stopped him. Not the government, not Wall Street, not the banks. The scam grew to billions, then tens of billions, until one day, the entire system began to crack because 2008 was coming, and when the global financial crisis hit, everyone wanted their money back at the same time. And that's when Bernie Madoff's perfect world finally collapsed. In part 2, we'll see how investors lost everything, how families were destroyed, and how the biggest financial fraud in history finally exploded. For nearly 20 years, Bernie Madoff looked unstoppable. Markets crashed, dot-com bubble burst, banks failed, funds collapsed, but somehow, Madoff's investors never lost money, not even once. Every single month, they received the same statement: green numbers, profits, growth, stability. It felt like magic. When the market fell 20%, they still made money. When chaos hit Wall Street, they were safe. People started calling him something strange, a financial genius. Some even said, he must know secrets nobody else knows. But there was no genius, no secret, no strategy, just lies and spreadsheets, because behind the scenes, there were no trades happening at all. Zero. The entire investment firm was basically a printing machine, fake statements, fake confirmations, fake transactions, everything fabricated. And the craziest part? The office where billions were supposedly managed was almost empty. A few old computers, paper files, nothing special. It looked more like a small accounting room. Then the control center of a multi-billion-dollar empire. But nobody checked closely, because nobody wanted to. Bernie understood something powerful about human psychology. People don't trust what's easy. They trust what's hard to access. So he did something brilliant. He made his fund exclusive. You couldn't just invest, even if you had money. Sometimes he rejected people on purpose. Millionaires, celebrities, big investors. He would say, "Sorry, we're full." And suddenly, everyone wanted in even more. Because humans think, if I'm not allowed in, it must be valuable. It became like a private club, a secret society of wealthy insiders, Hollywood producers, famous actors, university foundations, hospitals, charities, retirement funds, even Holocaust survivor foundations. They all trusted Bernie. Entire life savings, entire charities, everything. Because he wasn't just a businessman anymore. He became something else. A legend. People said, if Bernie manages your money, you're safe forever. Forever. That word would later destroy thousands of lives. But here's the twist. Someone did notice. One man. A small, stubborn financial analyst named Harry Markopoulos. Not famous, not powerful, just curious. In the late 1990s, he looked at Madoff's returns, and something bothered him. The numbers didn't make sense. They were too smooth, too perfect, too consistent. Real markets don't behave like that. Even the best traders lose sometimes. But Bernie never did. Statistically, it was impossible. Harry ran the math again, and again, and again. Same result. Fraud. 100% fraud. So he did what any responsible person would do. He reported it to the SEC, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission, the Financial Police of America. He wrote a detailed report, pages of evidence, mathematics, proof. He literally titled it, "The World's Largest Hedge Fund is a Fraud." Clear, direct, obvious. But guess what happened? Nothing. The SEC ignored him. They didn't investigate properly. They barely checked. They simply assumed, Bernie Madoff. Impossible, he's too respected. Reputation protected him, not facts. Harry kept trying. For 10 years. 10 years of warnings. 10 years of reports. 10 years of being ignored. And during those 10 years, The scam grew bigger and bigger and bigger. By the early 2000s, money was pouring in like a waterfall. Billions of dollars from all over the world, Europe, Asia, America. Everyone wanted Bernie. And remember, this wasn't investment money. It wasn't growing. It wasn't multiplying. It was just sitting there in bank accounts, waiting, because he wasn't investing it at all. He simply moved money around. New deposits, pay old investors. Like a giant shell game. But there was a problem. The bigger this scheme got, the more dangerous it became. Imagine balancing a house of cards. If it's small, it's stable. But the taller it gets, the easier it falls. Bernie knew this. He was constantly afraid, always stressed, always calculating, because he needed one thing to survive: more money, every single day, without new investors. The illusion would collapse instantly, so he kept smiling, kept promising, kept lying, and the world kept trusting. Then came 2008, the year everything changed. The global financial crisis, banks collapsing, Lehman Brothers bankrupt, stock markets crashing, fear everywhere. And what do scared investors do? They withdraw money, lots of money. At the same time, suddenly, Bernie started receiving massive requests. Withdraw my funds. Send my cash. We need liquidity. Millions, then billions, then more. But there was a problem. The money didn't exist. It never existed, remember. It was never invested. Most of it had already been used to pay other people. It was gone. And now, everyone wanted it back. At once. It was like a bank run, except worse. Because this wasn't a bank. It was pure fiction. Within weeks, investors requested nearly $7 billion. Bernie only had a few $100 million left. That's when he realized something terrifying. It was over. 40 years of lies about to explode. One cold December night, Bernie called his two sons, Mark and Andrew. They worked at the firm, but they had no idea about the fraud. To them, their father was a genius, a hero, a legend. They sat down together, quiet office, late at night, and Bernie finally said it, calmly, almost casually. It's all one big lie. At first they laughed. They thought he was joking, but he wasn't. He told them everything. There were no trades, no profits, no strategy, just a giant Ponzi scheme. For decades, their faces went white because they understood immediately. This wasn't just illegal, this was historic. This would destroy thousands of families, including their own. The next morning, they reported him to the authorities, their own father, and just like that, the most untouchable man on Wall Street was finished. Within 24 hours, FBI agents knocked on Bernie Madoff's door, handcuffs ready. The empire collapsed overnight. But the worst part wasn't his arrest. It was what happened next. Families bankrupt, charities destroyed, retirements erased, and some victims couldn't handle the loss at all. In part 3, we'll see the human tragedy, the suicides, the court trial, and how one man's greed ruined thousands of lives forever. The biggest financial scam in history, part 3. When everything fell apart, December 11th, 2008. Early morning, cold air, quiet streets in Manhattan, inside a luxury apartment building. Bernie Madoff was sitting alone. No phone calls, no investors, no employees, just silence. For the first time in decades, he wasn't pretending anymore. He knew it was over. Then came the sound. A knock on the door. Firm, official, unavoidable. 3 letters that every criminal fears. FBI. When he opened the door, there was no resistance, no running, no excuses, just a tired old man. Agents asked one simple question. Are you Bernie Madoff? Yes. Did you run a Ponzi scheme? Another pause. And then, yes. Just like that. 40 years of lies ended in one word. Yes. They placed handcuffs on him. The same hands that signed billions of dollars in fake profits. The same hands that shook hands with presidents and bankers. Now, they were trembling as he was led away. The king of Wall Street, walking out like an ordinary criminal. News spread fast, faster than anyone expected. Bernie Madoff arrested, massive fraud uncovered, billions missing. At first, people thought it was a mistake. Impossible. This had to be fake news. Not Bernie, not the respected chairman of NASDAQ, not the calm, trusted family man, but it was real, very real. And when investors checked their accounts, they realized something horrifying. Everything was gone. Retirement funds, zero. College savings, zero. Life savings, gone. Some people had invested for 20 years, some for 30. Entire futures erased overnight. Imagine waking up at 65 years old, ready to retire, and discovering you have nothing, not less, nothing, starting from zero, with no time left to recover. This wasn't just money. This was people's lives, their dreams, their security, their children's future, all deleted by one man. This is where the story stops being about finance and starts being about tragedy, because numbers don't cry, people do. Thousands of victims came forward, small business owners, teachers, doctors, grandparents, entire charities. One foundation that supported cancer patients lost everything. A Holocaust survivor charity lost everything. Hospitals, scholarships, community centers, gone. But the darkest part was the suicides. Some people couldn't handle the shock. They blamed themselves. They felt ashamed, embarrassed, broken. One investor shot himself in his office. Another jumped from a building. Families destroyed. Marriages collapsed. Depression everywhere. And maybe the most heartbreaking story was inside Bernie's own home. His family, his sons, Mark and Andrew, the ones who reported him. They became targets overnight. Media harassment, public hatred, threats. Everywhere they went, people stared, spit, insulted them, because their last name was Madoff. And 10 years later, Mark couldn't take it anymore. He hanged himself on the anniversary of his father's arrest. Imagine that. The scam didn't just destroy strangers, it destroyed his own children. That's how toxic greed can be. It poisons everything, even blood. March 2009, federal court, crowded room, reporters everywhere, victims crying in the hallway. Bernie Madoff entered the courtroom. No smile now, no confidence, no power. Just an old man in a gray suit, looking smaller than ever. The judge read the charges, 11 counts, fraud, money laundering, perjury, theft. Each one carrying years in prison, decades, life sentences. The judge asked, "How do you plead?" Bernie didn't fight, didn't deny, didn't argue. He simply said, "Guilty," to everything. No excuses, no defense, because there was nothing to defend. The evidence was overwhelming. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't bad luck. It wasn't a failed investment. It was deliberate, calculated, cold, for 40 years. Then came the moment everyone waited for, sentencing day. Victims filled the courtroom. One by one, they spoke. Some cried, some screamed, some couldn't even talk. A retired teacher said, "I worked 35 years for that money." A mother said, "My son can't go to college now." An elderly couple said, "We have to go back to work at 70. Story after story, pain after pain. The judge listened quietly. Then he looked at Bernie and said something powerful. He said, "This crime was extraordinarily evil. Extraordinarily evil. Not careless, not reckless. Evil." And then he gave the sentence. 150 years in prison. Not 10, not 20. 150. More than a lifetime. A symbolic message. You will never see freedom again. The courtroom applauded. Some cried, some smiled, but nothing could bring their money back. Justice came too late. Bernie was sent to a federal prison in North Carolina. No luxury, no comfort, just bars, concrete, silence. From penthouses and private jets to a small cell, reality hit hard. Other inmates mocked him, called him Ponzi, Wall Street thief, grandpa scammer, the most powerful man in finance, now eating cafeteria food, sleeping on a metal bed, wearing prison clothes. For decades, he spent his final years there, alone, forgotten, no empire, no respect, no money, just time. Time to think, time to remember, time to regret, if he even felt regret. Outro tease, part 4. But the story doesn't end with prison, because Bernie's collapse changed something bigger. It exposed huge failures. Failures in the government, failures in regulators, failures in the entire financial system. How did nobody stop him for 40 years? How did the SEC miss every warning? How many other scams are still hidden today? In part 4, we'll uncover the investigations, the shocking mistakes, and the lessons the world learned from the biggest financial scam in history. Welcome back to our series on the biggest financial scam in history. In our last episode, we saw how Bernie Madoff's empire of deceit started to show its first cracks. Now we dive into the final frantic years before the whole house of cards came crashing down. By the mid-2000s, Madoff was a living legend. He was the former chairman of the Nasdaq, a respected philanthropist, and the man who held the key to unbelievable, steady returns. His exclusivity was his greatest marketing tool. Getting into Madoff's fund wasn't easy. You had to know someone. You had to be invited. This created a frenzy, with the world's wealthiest individuals and institutions practically begging to give him their money. They felt lucky, chosen. But behind the curtain, the reality was a frantic, desperate scramble. The market was becoming more volatile. The dot-com bubble had burst, and the rumblings of the 2008 financial crisis were on the horizon. For a normal fund, ups and downs are expected. But Madoff's fund, it only went up. Month after month, year after year, his statements showed those magical, consistent gains of 10 to 12%. This should have been the biggest red flag of all. In the real world of investing, such consistency is impossible, but greed is a powerful blinder. His investors saw what they wanted to see, a money-making machine that was immune to market reality. Inside Madoff's office, the pressure was immense. The scheme was now so enormous, managing the flow of money was a logistical nightmare. Remember, there was no actual trading. When new investors came in, their money was used to pay off the ones who wanted to cash out. It was a classic Ponzi scheme, but on a scale never before imagined. The 17th floor of the Lipstick Building in New York, where the investment arm operated, was a complete sham. A small, loyal crew, including his right-hand man Frank DePascali, were busy fabricating an entire universe of fake trades. They used old-fashioned date stamps to backdate trade confirmations and created elaborate, falsified statements to send to clients. It was a paper-based illusion, a pre-digital con running in a high-tech world. Meanwhile, a few brave souls were sounding the alarm. A financial analyst named Harry Markopoulos had been trying to warn the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, for years. He submitted detailed, damning reports, essentially spelling out exactly how Madoff's operation had to be a fraud. Markopoulos famously titled one submission, "The world's largest hedge fund is a fraud." He calculated that for Madoff to be making the trades he claimed, he would have had to own more options on certain stocks than actually existed. The math simply didn't work, but his warnings fell on deaf ears. The SEC investigated Madoff multiple times over the years, but each time they came away empty-handed. Madoff was charming, powerful, and always had a plausible, if convoluted, explanation. He was a master of deflection, a wolf in sheep's clothing who had the regulators completely fooled. They looked, but they didn't see. As 2008 approached, the global financial system began to teeter on the brink of collapse. For Madoff, this was the beginning of the end. The steady stream of new money he needed to keep the Ponzi scheme afloat started to dry up. Worse, his existing investors, spooked by the market turmoil, started asking for their money back. Not in small amounts, but in a torrent. The requests for redemptions ballooned from millions to billions of dollars. $7 billion to be exact. It was a bank run, and Madoff's bank was completely empty. He had built a skyscraper of lies, and the foundation was crumbling. The man who seemed to defy financial gravity was about to come crashing back to earth. There was no more money, no more time, and no more hiding. The end game was here. In early December 2008, the pressure became unbearable. Madoff knew the game was over. He called his sons, Mark and Andrew, into his Manhattan apartment. They had worked their entire lives in the legitimate market-making side of his business, completely separate from the fraudulent investment advisory arm. They believed their father was a genius. It was there, in his lavish penthouse, that Bernie Madoff finally confessed. He looked at his sons and said, "It's all one big lie." He explained that his celebrated investment fund was a giant Ponzi scheme. His sons were stunned, horrified. The man they had idolized, their father, was a fraud. After absorbing the shock, they did the only thing they could. They walked out of that apartment and went straight to the authorities. The next day, on December 11, 2008, FBI agents arrived at Bernie Madoff's apartment. The biggest financial scam in history had finally been exposed. The fallout would be catastrophic, wiping out life savings, destroying charities, and leaving a trail of devastation that is still felt to this day. In our final episode, we will explore the aftermath of this colossal collapse. We'll look at the victims, the hunt for the missing billions, and the fate of Bernie Madoff and his family. The story isn't over yet. Make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss the conclusion to this incredible story. Thanks for watching.